Continue with our daily Gemara. We're in Sanhedrin, Kuf Ches Amud Beis 108b. I just want to make a comment about what we discussed in the previous class when the people ask Noach why God doesn't bring the Teva right away, and God says, Preda achas yeshli. Noach explains God's reasoning for holding off a flood because he has one Preda. So I realized I didn't translate the word Preda. I said that God had a precious one that he needed to save, which was Perek Chelek, but he needed to live out his years before the flood came. The literal translation of Preda is a pigeon. Why Perek Chelek is referred to as a pigeon, open for interpretation. Perhaps something we'll discuss later in the class today will give us some insight. Okay, now we discussed the days leading up to the flood, Noah's conversation, God's deliberation over destroying the people, what the people did to deserve that, Noah's relationship with the people, his conversations with them, and now we got to the final 7 days just before the flood. Now we get to the animals that entered the ark and the structure of the ark, and then eventually as the people come out of the ark. So we're at the widest set of lines, the first of the widest set of lines, and in the middle of the line there's a lahei indicating a verse, where the verse reads, God instructs Noah, from all of the pure animals, meaning to say animals that will eventually be kosher when the Torah is given, Tikach lach, you should take for yourself Shiva, 7 and 7, Ishu Ishtoi, man and his wife, 7 male kosher animals and 7 female kosher animals. Gemara asks, the way in which the Torah refers to male and female is Ishu Ishtoi, man and his wife. So the Gemara asks, Ishius L'behema mi isla, is there such a thing as husband and wife amongst animals? Mates, and do they have any exclusivity with whom they mate? They mate with anybody in their species, and that's what the Gemara indicates. Amar Shmuel ben Nachmani explains the reason why the Torah uses the term man and wife. Amar Rabbi explaining, the animals that enter the ark were only those with whom no avera was done, no sin was done. So this can be either one of two things. Either, as mentioned before, the Gemara said that the people at the time were engaged with intimacy with animals, so perhaps these are animals with whom no man or no human cohabitated. But the way Rashi seems to be saying that they only that these were animals that did not engage in the cross intimacy that we talked about before, besides for the fact that humans and animals were cohabitating, but there was cross cohabitation between species, and the animals that entered the Teva, the ark, were only those who engaged in cohabitation only with their own species. When I asked how would Noach know to identify which animals engaged in negative behavior and which ones didn't? So the Gemara gives two options. Rav Chisda suggests, Chisda states, She'aviron l'fnei Teva. Noah made animals walk by the Teva. Kol sha'Teva kalatatoi. Whichever animal was taken in, kalatas means be taken in, to be welcomed. Kalat means to grab, to take in. So whoever was taken in by the ark, biyadua, Noach knew, shaloi nevda b'hamaveda, no sin was done with this animal. Any animal which the Teva did not accept, did not take in, biyadua, was known to Noach, nevda b'haveda, didn't do any sin. This is Rav Chisda's interpretation and understanding, and how Noach knew which animals behaved properly. Essentially, God gave this power to the ark, that the ark itself would absorb and take in any animals that behaved, and ones that didn't were not accepted, not taken in by the ark itself. Rabbi said, Noach didn't have to do all that work. he didn't need to bring all the animals and then wait for the ark to take them in. But Rabbi says, the animals that behaved on their own arrived to enter the ark. So I'm going to suggest a Hasidic reading on this. So you've mentioned before that the Hasidus interprets the flood as a great mikveh. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the measurement for a mikveh is 40 sa. It's a measurement, it's 40 units of water. And the flood was for 40 days, and we talked about how the flood is a rebirth. We spoke about that before. But the Baal Shem Tov has a different interpretation, another interpretation to be found in Chassidus, which comes from the Baal Shem Tov, which is, the verse reads, when God tells Noah to enter the ark, the verse says, Boya lateva, come in to the ark. Now, ordinarily would say lateva, go to the ark. Why Boya lateva? It's implied that God's inside the ark inviting Noah in. Baal Shem Tov adds further, the word to describe ark here is teva. Now, when we say the holy ark in the temple, or the holy ark in our synagogue, we don't use the word teva kadosh, or kadosha. We say aron kadosh. Aron is ordinarily the word used to describe ark. Teva, more precisely translated, is container. So said the Baal Shem Tov, the word teva has another translation. The word teva also means a word. A word. And therefore interprets the Baal Shem Tov. God's telling Noah, when you see the raging flood coming, the raging flood being the distractions that our world has to offer, specifically the distractions offered by the worries and stresses of making a livelihood associated with water, we've talked about in previous classes. So God says, come into the words, come into the holy words, come into my words of Torah and Tefillah, and that will help you to be able to float above the raging waters. Now, if that's the interpretation, then perhaps the animals entering the ark is a reference to this idea that the animal soul, every Jew, as we talked about before, as we've talked about many times, has two souls, the godly soul and the animal soul being the natural biological sense of self, the godly soul being that part of me which feels always connected to Hashem. So the godly soul is certainly praying. Obviously, it wants to connect to Hashem. It's certainly going into the words of Torah and Tefillah and prayer. But the animal soul is also to be invited. Even my natural sense of self should go into the ark. The animal's got to come into. But perhaps sometimes we have some sin, some past sin, that's blocking us from fully entering into the Torah. Our godly soul stays pure, but the animal soul, our sense of self, the way we feel about ourselves on a regular human level, feels maybe unworthy to enter into the words of Torah and prayer because there's some sin that's blocking us from getting in. And here comes two options. Rav Chizda, who says that whatever the ark opened up and it took in, and the ark rejected. The ark, Noah brought all the animals forth, and the ark took in those who behaved and rejected those who didn't behave. Perhaps what that's suggesting is that, if you want to properly get into prayer, you have to reject that part of you that sins. You have to let go of that. The ark has to take in the part of me. The animal soul is ready to engage in prayer, but the animal soul, the part of me that engaged in past behavior of sin, you got to reject it. That's Rav Chizda's approach. The other approach, which says the holy animals came on their own. No need to hold yourself off from praying because you feel like I can't pray properly because I haven't fully rejected my misbehaviors. You go into prayer to the best you can, and that part of you, and the prayer itself will bring along with it the animals, the part of you that's capable of being in prayer. In other words, Noah didn't have to be worried, or that even the ark didn't have to be worried, parsing between the sinful animals and the unsinful animals. The words of Torah itself, the ark itself, draws in the animals that are capable of being drawn in. In other words, you go into your Torah and prayer, you get into the teva, get that prayer going, get the teva operating, get the words of Torah going, get it operating, and automatically it'll draw forth all the powers that can be elevated in there, including those that are animalistic. And the animal souls, the part of my animal soul that misbehaved in the past, not even going to be on the table here. We're just going to go forth in our prayer, in our Torah, into the ark. Perhaps a Hasidic interpretation to this idea. Of course, as always, the floor is open for other ways of thinking about it. The Gemara comments further on the verses describing the structure of the ark. So we talked about the time leading up to the ark, we talked about the animals coming into the ark, and now we're talking about the structure of the ark itself. The Gemara says, the verse reads, Asei lecha tevas atzi gofer. God tells Noah, build for yourself a ark made out of gopher wood. My gopher, what's gopher? So two options. Amar Rav Ada, Amar Amri Devei Rav Shila. Rav Ada says that they taught in the study house of Rav Shila, Zu Mavliga. This is a type of wood called Mavliga. Amrila, others say it's not Mavliga, but a wood called Gulmish. Now in the Steinsaltz translation of the Talmud, he translates the word Gulmish as willow. And I tried to look for the other one. I can't see it explicitly, but in this Chumash here, which is a wonderful Chumash, which has the direct translation of the verse in the bold, and then the unbolded section is interpolated based on Rashi's commentary and based on the Lubavitcher Rebbe's interpretation of Rashi. So it's a very, very beautiful work. It's this edition, a version of this edition is what we have in our shul at the MTC. And here they translate. They don't get into the discussion over here about whether it's mavliga or glumish, but they translate the word gopher as cypress tree. So maybe cypress is the other one. Maybe cypress is mavliga and glumish is willow. I'm not exactly sure. If someone knows better, welcome to let me know. Be happy to find out. Gemara continues in describing the structure. God tells Noach, Soyar tasal teva, make for yourself a tsoyar. What's a tsoyar? What does the word tsoyar come from? So, says the Gemara. Rabbi Rechan says, God told Noach, Kavaba, establish in your ark avonim toivos, margolius, good precious stones and jewels, kedeshiyu meidus lachem ketzarayim, so that it'll be as bright as the afternoon. The word for the afternoon is saharayim, coming from the same root word soyar, in what God's telling him. So when God says make for yourself a soyar, what God's telling Noah is make your ark as bright as soyar as an afternoon. Okay. Now Rashi, in his commentary on the verse, actually brings two opinions which come from the Medrash. One that says God told him to put a precious stone in the singular or a window in the singular. And the Rebbe has a very beautiful talk about what this means. How does a singular window or a singular stone provide light for a whole massive ark that's 300 cubits long? I mean, it's a huge structure. And the Rebbe suggests, based on other verses, that God did not have to tell Noah obvious things. And the obvious thing would be, bring provisions into the ark, including that which you will need to be able to see. Oil, lamps, and whatnot, like people had in those days. And the fact that God tells him make a tsoyar means there's something unique about this window or about this gem for purposes that God wants them to be there, as explained at length in this talk. But that idea, that Rashi, is separate from the interpretation of the Gemara here, where the Gemara here explicitly states that it's multiple stones and multiple precious jewels, so that it'd be bright like the afternoon. So obviously the interpretation of the Gemara here is different than the interpretation of Rashi in the Gemara. Now I don't remember reading this exactly, and I re-looked again, just a brief look at the Rebbe's talk, and I don't see the Rebbe commenting about this, but it would seem to me that the reason why Rashi in his commentary on the Chumash does not take this Gemara, but rather takes the Medrash, is because the verse is in the singular. Tzoyhar taslateva, make for yourself a tzoyhar, referring to a singular item. Whereas the Gemara here isn't talking about a singular item, but make the ark be in a state of tzoyhar. So maybe on the more literal interpretation of the verse, which is what Rashi's objective is in his commentary on the Chumash, he sticks with the other interpretation that tzoyhar means a singular stone and a singular window, and as the Rebbe explains it, not for the purposes of light, but for some other purpose that God has. Whereas the Gemara here is clearly saying that make it bright like the afternoon. Okay, but all that is still open-ended discussion somewhat. The basic idea here in the Gemara is that God is saying, in the Gemara's interpretation here of Rabbi Yochanan, that God is saying, make for yourself a bright, make for yourself a tzoyhar, which means turn your ark to be as bright as tzaharayim, as the afternoon, by filling it up with all these precious jewels which shine. Then the Gemara comments and says, the verse reads, that the verse reads, God tells Noach that when he builds this ark, that the ark should reach up into a amma, into one amma, which is only 1 cubit. So explains the Gemara that I want to bring it up here so you can kind of see an image. It'd be easier to understand. The Gemara is explaining what the verse means when it says that it should reach up into an amma. The verse is chapter 6, verse 16. Yeah. Right, that's the word I'm looking for. Taper the roof. And the Gemara explains what for. Why can't the roof just be flat? Why does it have to be tapered, reaching up to an amma? So explains the Gemara, this is the way it stands. It helps it keep its balance. It's a very wide structure and a very long structure, and if it's flat in the top, it'll wave around. But the fact that it's tapered up to an amma makes it easier to stand. I'm not sure if this picture is going to be clear in the video, but you can kind of see there are 3 floors, which we can discuss in a moment, and you can see how the roof is tapered on all ends to reach to the middle. And over there, you see they put the singular window on the top there. That's what I was referring to earlier in Rashi's commentary. Okay, the verse continues and reads that Tachtim Shniyim Vishlishim Tasa, that the ark should have a basement, a middle floor, and a third floor. 3 floors: the lower floor, the second floor, and the third floor. Stories. Tana, so it was taught in the Mishnah H text. Tachtim, the lowest floor, the basement. Lezevel was for garbage, for waste. And Soyim, the third floor, the middle floor, Lebehema, for the animals. El Yonim, the top floor, La'adam, for human beings, for Noah and his wife and his children and their wives. Now, when the water starts to, when the rain, when the mabul, the flood finishes, and the water starts to subside, so Noah sends out a series of birds to see if there's dry land for him to, land and park his teva and get out. And the first is Vayishlach hasa oirev. He sends the oirev, the raven. Amrei Shlakish comments. Tshuva nitzchis. There's an eternal response. Hishivu oirev l'noyach, that the oirev, that the raven can respond to Noah. In other words, the raven has an eternal complaint, an eternal grudge, as it were, against Noah. Namely, Amar Loi, the raven would say to Noah, Rabbach, your teacher, meaning God, Sinaini hates me. Va'ata Sani, and you hate me. Both your teacher God and you hate me. How's that? Rabbi, your teacher Sinani, your teacher hates me, God hates me. Why? Because from the kosher animals God put 7 of each. 7 male, 7 female. But minatmeim, from the unkosher animals, shnayim, only 2, male and female. So clearly God doesn't like me as much, or hates me. Va'ata, you, Sinesana, you also hate me. Why? Sha'atan meniach mimin shiva, you're leaving behind in the ark birds, of which you have 7 of each. V'shalech mimin shnayim, and you send out a bird first. Later, Noach sends out a dove, as we'll learn. But first, he sends out the raven, of whom there's only 2. In Pagebi Sarchama, if I get stricken by the angel of the sun, I get struck down by the heat, or Sartzina, or the angel of freezing, I get frozen to death or something. Will you not have caused that the world will now lack a species? Because who's going to populate the world with ravens if the male raven is dead? Oi, says the raven, or maybe you Noah, maybe you want my wife, you're jealous, you're sending me out. Amar loi, so Noach says to the raven, Rasha, you wicked one, b'mutali, from humans, from my own wife, which ordinarily is permissible for me to be intimate with her. Necessarily, in the ark, she has been forbidden for me to cohabitate, as we'll learn in a moment. While they were in the ark, there was no intimacy, there was no marital relation. So Noach tells the raven, if my wife ordinarily is permitted to me, I'm not allowed to be with her. But necessarily, that which is always forbidden to me, your wife, the female raven, lekoshkein, how much more so? End conversation between Noah and the raven. Obviously, there's some deeper message here, and I encourage, as I always do, our viewers and our listeners to think and consider as to what this might mean, what this interesting conversation with the raven might be. Now the Gemara comments in Nesru. How do we know that cohabitation was forbidden in the ark? So says the Gemara, because the verse reads, "Uba sa'ala teva." You shall enter the teva. This is God telling Noah, you shall enter the teva. Ata you, v'necha, and your children, v'ishtecha, and your wife, v'neshebanacha, and your children's wives, itach, with you. So note the order: you, your sons, your wife, and your children's wives. So first the males are listed, father Noach and his sons, and then the females are listed, Noah's wife and his children's wives, respective wives. Even later, when it speaks to God, when the verse describes God telling Noah to leave the ark, same in Ateva, when God says to leave the ark, it's Ata, it's you, the Ishtecha, your wife, Uvanecha, and your sons, V'neshebanecha, and your sons' wives, Itach, with you. So when they're told to go in, the order is males then females, father and sons, wife and wives. But when God tells them to go out, then it's Noah, you and your wife together, and then your sons and their wives, thus implying that until they were told to go out together, husband and wife, they were not allowed to be together. Which perhaps would mean, following this interpretation from the Baal Shem Tov, when the Baal Shem Tov says that going into the ark means to enter, spiritually speaking, means to enter into the words of Torah and prayer as refuge from the raging waters of the world around us. The Rebbe comments on that and says, well then why does God say get out of the ark? The reason why God says to get out of the ark, explains the Rebbe, is because the ultimate objective is not that we hang out in the spiritual life of our Torah and prayer, but the ultimate objective is that we take the inspiration for Torah and prayer and we go out to the world and saturate the world with holiness. Which means to say, when you go into the words of Torah and prayer, you have to leave the world behind you. When you're in Torah, you're fully ensconced in that. When you're in prayer, you're fully engaged and engrossed in that, and the world around you is behind, including your own intimacy with your own spouse. It's left behind for that hour. But then when you go out, when you go out of the words of Torah and prayer, take the inspiration you got while you were fully engaged in your words of Torah and prayer and bring that to your relationship with your spouses. And thus, when you're told to go into the words, separate. You have to be fully focused and engaged in that connection to the words of Torah and prayer. But when you go out, it's with your wife, it's with your family, it's with your spouse, so that they too, so that you can bring the holiness and saturate that part of your life as well. And the Gemara concludes, and says, Mikan, from this change in description, from when God tells them to go into the ark versus the way God tells them to come out of the ark, from here we can derive that they were told that they were forbidden to engage in marital relations, and therefore, getting back to the original conversation, Noah tells the raven, there's no way I would want your wife, because I can't even be with my own wife. Certainly I wouldn't be with yours. Okay, one more comment on the issue of intimacy in the ark, and then tomorrow we'll get to more about Noah coming out of the ark and the birds. The second bird he sends, the dove, that we'll talk about in the next class. But let's look at the final comment the Gemara has about intimacy in the ark. Tana Rabbanan, our sages taught in the Mishnaic age text, Shleisha, there were 3 Shimshu B'Teva who engaged in marital relations in the ark. V'kulam, and all of them laku, were punished. Kelev, the dog, V'orev, and the raven, V'cham, and Cham, one of Noah's 3 sons. So Kelev, the dog, was punished nikshar. It's tied up. Meaning the dog, for all of history since then, I guess, has been destined to not be the free animal that most other animals are. It's a house dog, and it's held on a chain, it's held on a leash. It's tied up. Orev, the raven, Reik, spits. Apparently spits a lot. And moreover, the way Rashi says it is that the intimacy, the seed transferring from male to female in the raven, is done through spit. I don't know what the biology of the ravens are, but this is what Rashi's comment is. Cham, and Cham, the son of Noach, who engaged in marital relations in the ark against God's instructions, as we just described earlier, Laka, he was punished, ba'odah, in his skin, and that his skin turned black. Okay, so we'll stop over here, and God willing, we'll continue with our shirdim. We'll get to the Yonah, the bird, that the dove that Noah sends out to bring back the olive branch, indicating that the flood has subsided, and we'll analyze that with more. We'll analyze that as well, and of course, we'll try to find spiritual lessons that we can take from this. And we hope everybody's doing well and everybody's safe, and we continue to pray for a quick and healthy resolution to what we're all going through as humanity during this time.